Hello, my name is Voya and welcome to mydeepguide, and in today's video we are checking out the Penstar eNote 2. This one, hey? Nah, I tricked ya. It's actually this one. Or wait a minute, is it this one or that one? When you turn it around, then you can see the difference. Yeah, it's this one. This is the new one, yeah, for sure. Well, alright, Penstar eNote 2, or the N Pro, N10 Pro, or whatever it may be. What is it? Well, if you haven't seen my previous video where I covered the nearly identical Penstar eNote 1, yes. What's special about it? Well, so why do we have so many buttons? Because this tablet has no touch support. You can't operate it via touch at all. The only way that you can operate it is via the pen, because it uses this EMR pen, which is not an ordinary pen either. It is a super special pen which has double the amount of pressure sensitivity than the other ones at 8,192 pressure sensitivity levels. Unfortunately, it's very sad that they've opted to double down on that, because that simply doesn't work and it's completely unnecessary. The only thing that happens is that you can't properly use pressure sensitive brushes on this device because they've been calibrated in such a terrible way that you would need to kind of write with all of your might, and then when you actually get it to respond to pressure sensitivity levels where you're pushing really hard, then the nib goes in and then you need to take it out, and because you get the ghost writing as well. So all in all, not the best experience to be had. And then you might say like, well, hey, but I can just throw this away and use another EMR pen because this is EMR Wacom enabled technology. Yes, it is, but you can only use 8,192 EMR pens, and to the best of my knowledge, the only ones that I've been able to find are these. They're not that great. Alright, so what gives? Why would they actually do that? Well, the pen thing, I genuinely don't understand. They're not using the added levels of sensitivities, and it just makes things a lot worse. The second part is, why no touch? Unlike the EMR layer, which is underneath everything, the touch layer digitizer is on top of the content of the screen. Traditionally, not only adds thickness, but it affects the quality of the image in two ways. It creates an ever so slightly fuzzier image because of that added layer. It adds diffusion of light, thus making the display a little bit dark. So the idea behind Penstar's eNote 2 and eNote 1 displays not having touch is to have brighter display of the white colors, thus having better contrast and better clarity than other devices. And this is something that we are going to be checking out. Firstly, I'm going to be comparing it against its predecessor using the display analysis framework that I've designed, so that we can see how do these compare. And in another video, I'm going to be comparing this and seeing how different actually is it when compared to other displays of similar type. These two are really similar, but they are also really different. And if you're choosing between the two, you want to go for the eNote 2. Just saying, like, right out of the get-go, this is the one you want to go for. Why? Well, first and foremost, 300 ppi versus 227 ppi on the eNote 1. Second of all, 32 gigs of storage, 128 gigs of storage, no SD card on either of them, so that actually matters a lot. Quad-core 1.8 GHz, I believe, on this one, 8-core 2.2 GHz CPU on this one, 4 gigs of RAM, 2 gigs of RAM, Android 11, Android 14. No Google Play on either of them, unfortunately, so you can't really install apps properly. I don't know if you can sideload them, but I would not recommend sideloading apps because that's just an invitation to compromise your data and a lot of other nasty things. In this video, I'm not gonna be going over the entirety of the ecosystem and all of that kind of stuff. How do you customize buttons and all that kind of stuff? Because you can customize all the buttons. It's really good and it's really awesome. But there's like an uber duper long video that's an hour or so, which is not only a review but also a guide that I've already done on the eNote 1, and I'm certainly not going to do that again because it's all exactly the same here as well. Even though they do have some name changes in brushes, it's all pretty much exactly the same, just a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit more tighter on the eNote 2. What are the other meaningful differences between the two? Well, this one has a slightly larger battery, therefore it's ever so slightly heavier, but it's marginal, it doesn't really matter. It's a good thing that it does have a larger battery because that new SoC is going to be more power hungry, more RAM, more storage, more electronics, they will consume more energy. But the good news is that even though the battery life on the eNote 2 is not as good as it is on the eNote 1, it's certainly still really, really good. More on that in the second portion of the video with the DAF analysis results. This is not a front-lit device, so no front light, no touch. So those are very, very meaningful differences between the two. One of my main gripes with the eNote 1 was overall dated performance. The performance, don't expect that it's gonna be like, oh, across the board faster, better and everything. No, you do have more storage, you have Android 14, you have all of these meaningful things, but to me, the most impactful differences between these two devices come down to three most important aspects. Number one is the 300 ppi screen. That screen difference is not just the resolution difference, but it's also the quality of the rendering and the contrast and clarity. There is a huge difference in observable difference and measurable difference between the two, and when you just put them side by side, there's no comparison. You wanna go for this one any day of the week. Number two is the reflectivity and the surface itself. Let's find the light. So this is Penstar eNote 1 doing its reflection, and this is the same light and same lighting conditions on the eNote 2. Quite a bit of a difference. And as you will see in the results, it's not just the reflectivity, but it's also the roughness of the surface and the character of the surface. Therefore, the writing feel is much, much better on the eNote 2. And the third aspect that's important is the writing quality. One of the main problems that I've had on eNote 1, and it unfortunately remains even when updated all the way to the latest software, the way that it captured handwriting was absolutely horrible. It didn't really resemble what you were writing at all. And it was inaccurate, it was all over the place, the lines were kind of squiggly, and it was just plain ugly. Now, to a large degree, this has been improved, and when you actually write on one of them next to each other, you can see that difference clearly, night and day. And the capturing of the handwritten strokes on eNote 2, the rendering of the characters and the rendering of the strokes is absolutely gorgeous and beautifully, beautifully, wonderfully executed on the eNote 2. However, it's not perfect, and there's a really, really big issue, and it's only down to the pressure sensitivity calibration. Why? If you use any of the pressure sensitive brushes, the calibration is done in such a way that you still have the problem of it not capturing the character of your handwriting properly. It's gonna do a guesstimation, estimation, and it just feels wrong. The only way that this felt right when writing was to use a ballpoint brush, which is not pressure sensitive, and then the story changes, and then it's a very pleasant type of an experience to do. As an e-reader, again, I refer you to watch the in-depth review and guide of the eNote 1, because the reader functionalities are exactly the same, but the reader functionality is really, really good on this device, although you still have that same archaic method of copying documents onto the device and then importing them into your reader bookshelves and things like that. So that's really, really backwards and kind of annoying to do, but once you do it and once you're done with that, then the usability of these documents is good. Is it as powerful and great as it is on, for example, books, or is it as multifunctional and interconnected with the e-reader like on the Supernote? No, it absolutely isn't. This is your bog standard, hey, I'm a reader, I do reader kind of things. Hey, I'm a notebook, I do kind of notebook things, and that's it. The platform itself is still dated. It feels like it's 5 years ago, but this time you have 300 ppi, nicer, crisper display, and an affordable price, and good build quality that should be fairly robust because it's not heavy, it's not super kind of rigid or anything like that. It actually feels good to use. I feel comfortable to use a device like this. I think that it's a shame that they did not customize the user interface to be far more modern with these buttons, because this here opens up so much potential, none of which has been used. I mean, the implementation of the buttons is as bare bones as it gets. Yes, you can customize which are the functionalities, but that's it. There's zero creativity involved, there's zero innovation involved, and to me it feels like a tremendously missed opportunity for a device of this sort, which is unfortunate, because it could have been something really, really original. All right, now let's head on over to Display Analysis Framework results and see what do we get and how do these compare to eNote 1 and eNote 2. And let's check out the readability results first. On the right-hand side, we have the Penstar eNote 2, and on the left-hand side, we have the eNote 1. And right out of the get-go, we can see the enormous benefits of that new 300 ppi panel, where you can just see that the clarity and readability of the same text, it's a huge, huge difference across the font sizes. So 16 points, 10 points, and 6 points, 100% standard font size, very, very clear difference. Naturally, much more evident when we're going down to the smaller fonts. When we step down to 70% of blackness of the fonts, we can see that both are legible, but that advantage of 300 ppi stays strong, which is even more evident on the 50% fonts. And here we can see also there's a granularity of the old display that is simply way less present on the new display. The difference becomes extremely evident when we actually get to the thin fonts. As you can see across the board, way better performance on the Note 2, as it is to be expected. And when we step down to the toughest one of them all, which is the thin fonts at 50% of blackness, we can see that, it's much more legible across the board. And on the 6 point, which is really the most difficult one, you can clearly differentiate which letters are which, while on the Note 1, that is not that much the case. You can see that it's actually fading quite a bit. Thick fonts are rendered very nicely on both of them. On the eNote 1, they are also really good, but they're simply nicer and better rendered on the Note 2. And the readability for the thick fonts at 50% blackness is great on both of them, and pretty much really close. But of course we get a little bit more sharpness and a little bit more readability on the Note 2. Moving on to the contrast and uniformity test, and here I am measuring out the rendering of whiteness and blackness of the display. Again, left-hand side eNote 1, right-hand side eNote 2. And this test performs two types of measurements, observable and display characteristics. In display characteristics, the aperture and the camera settings are done in such a way to compensate for the differences between three different lighting conditions: the excellent lighting condition, average, and poor lighting conditions, to kind of average them out as equally as possible. And this one is done so that it can expose any deficiencies or weak points of the display itself. After that, I do the observable test, and we'll talk more about that when we get there. And we can see right off the bat that the rendering of white color is really good at around 0.77, 75, and 78 across the different lighting conditions for the eNote 1, and equivalent we have 76, 75, and 77 for the eNote 2, which is roughly exactly the same for both of them. But where we can clearly see an observable difference is in the rendering of the black color, which is much more darker and better rendered on the eNote 2 using, again, that new display. And as a consequence, we get to have a much higher contrast ratio. On the eNote 1, the contrast ratio for the display portion of test was hovering at around 5.2 5.23, 5.26, 5.25, and on the Note 2 it was actually all the way up to 7.68, 7.95, and 7.61, so around 7.7. So much better contrast on the eNote 2 as well. The same is true in the observable portion of the contrast in uniformity test. In this portion of the test, the settings of the camera are set so that they resemble as closely as possible what the human eye can see in the same excellent, average, and poor lighting conditions. And we can see the same kind of pattern. The whites are rendered roughly exactly the same for both of the devices, but the black color does have advantage and it's darker in brighter situations on the eNote 2, carrying over a much higher contrast ratio for the eNote 2. Next portion of the test is the ghosting performance. Here I run the test of having a pure text content, pure graphics content, and then a combined graphics and text content. And I start from an empty page, cleared of all ghosting, cycle through 15 pages, and then end up on another clean page to see what the remnants of the ghosting is there and calculate the difference between the starting and the end clean quote-unquote image. We can see that it has a fairly similar character of ghosting for both of the devices, but across the board it is a lot better performing on the eNote 2, since both devices have 4 refresh modes. The previous one that we looked at was the ghosting in a normal display mode. Now we have the clear mode, and we can see that there are some differences. In the clear mode, the text performance on eNote 2 is worse than it is on the eNote 1. Graphics is a lot better, and combined is pretty much the same, but a bit worse on the eNote 2. In fast refresh mode, we continue seeing the same kind of trend, where the text refresh mode is worse on eNote 2, graphics refresh is pretty much the same, and combined is a little bit worse, very similar, but a little bit worse performing on the eNote 2. And lastly, when we get to the fastest refresh mode, the Ultra, we can see that, yeah, the Note 2 basically is a lot better than the eNote 1. One of the dramatic improvements on the eNote 2 is the surface of the screen, or the screen protector that is pre-applied. Because on eNote 1 we had a very reflective kind of surface, which was not a pleasant thing to use, especially not for reading and writing, where you can clearly see that this has been dramatically improved on the eNote 2. The intensity of the reflections themselves are fairly similar between the two, although they perform a little bit better on the eNote 2, but where the huge difference is actually in the sharpness itself. You can clearly see how the diffuse edge, it's like the edge itself is way less defined on the eNote 2, and this is something that helps diffuse the reflections and therefore offer less distractions and less fighting with the content of the screen and more pleasant overall use. When we get to measuring the roughness curve and the roughness profile of the surface of the screen, the surface that you're writing on, there is a dramatic difference between eNote 1 and eNote 2, and again, as the reflectivity was improved on eNote 2, you will see an even more dramatic improvement in the surface roughness. So this is the curve profile and the roughness curve of the eNote 1, and you can see that we have the roughness of 0.219, which can be classified as fairly smooth for these types of devices. The thing that does kind of offset this is this peak that we have here. Because of that maximum, it lowered all of these things, but you can also clearly see that it's not that kind of a paper-like of a thing here. When we switch over to the eNote 2, you can see that there's quite a bit of a difference, not just in the scale. So as I explained, the rogue peak did make an offset of the scale here. But most important of all, we can see that we have basically almost double the roughness, or more than double the roughness of the surface on the eNote 2 at 0.568 versus 0.219, I think. And the curve is really, really nice. We have deep and not so sharp valleys and nice and sharp peaks, which actually offers for a nice type of a writing feel. And these dips and nice and spacious dips between these big peaks allow for space for the tip of the pen to actually fall into it and give you that kind of a nice roughness paper-like type of a writing feel. Surface to screen distance on both devices is good, considering that they don't have a front light, so it's expected that they are in a sub 1mm zone, but it could be a lot better because we have seen devices without a front light that would have even below 0.5mm of that thickness. This is not where eNote, either of the eNote devices, lie. So eNote 1 is at around 0.9mm, as you can see here, with the eNote 2 going a little bit further at around 0.8, maybe 0.78, but let's say 0.8mm of surface to screen distance, which is good, but we've seen better, and I would have expected more and better for a device that doesn't have a capacitive touch layer in the stack itself. So no front light, no capacitive touch layer. Yeah, that distance, it would have been nice if it was even closer to the screen content. Writing latency of the eNote 1 has been measured to be at around 47.96 milliseconds, and I've redone the test since before I've originally measured it, because the device has been updated and the measurement methodology has been improved as well. So these are the latest numbers at 47.96, which is okay, but you know, we're talking about almost 50 millisecond writing latency, which is absolutely something that you can feel when you're writing and see, not just feel, but you can clearly see as you're writing. The highest performing devices are currently at 10, 12, 14 milliseconds, with the standard being between 20 and 30 milliseconds. So the almost 50 milliseconds in 2025 feels rather slow. The problem is that eNote 2, the newer device, actually crosses that 50 millisecond barrier, or reaches it. There's two things that I've noticed. It was a lot more inconsistent than the eNote 1, because it was ranging between like 47 milliseconds and 54 milliseconds, and I always do like 10 runs and then average out. But no way around it, it's clearly worse performing than the eNote 1. It's not a deal breaker as far as latency itself goes, but it's most definitely something that you will be noticing. And yeah, it is dated. When it comes to the refresh time, I performed the same test here with the contrast inverted image for better clarity to see when the image fully clears up. The footage is recorded at 480 frames per second with a fixed exposure, and I flip from a page that has combined content with text and images all the way to an empty page and measure the time it takes for the device to fully finish the updating process, and yeah, then I measure that out. And on the eNote 1, in a normal refresh mode, we have this type of performance. So it doesn't do it too blinky or anything like that, and it does the full screen kind of refresh thing in 417.08 milliseconds. In the clear refresh mode, it is a little bit faster at 356.61 milliseconds. With the fast refresh mode, it is definitely faster, but we do have a little bit more blinkiness going on. We're down to 294 milliseconds, and when we go to the ultra refresh mode, we have a lot more faster refresh mode, but you can clearly see a lot more ghosting and image degradation happening all over the place. When we go to eNote 2, we have similar style of clean type of refreshing in normal refresh mode, but this time it's slower than the eNote 1 at 500.50 milliseconds, which is basically half a second it takes for it to refresh in normal mode. In clear mode, Still very clean type of refresh, and we are down to 425 milliseconds, which is again slower than what we've had on eNote 1. Fast refresh mode, relatively clean and maybe cleaner, but definitely slower than what we've seen on eNote 1 again. And in the ultra mode as well, it is a lot slower than what we've seen on the eNote 1, but also worthy noting is that it's actually a lot cleaner than what we've seen on the eNote 1. However, the refresh time across the board for the eNote 2 is definitely slower in all of the refresh modes than what we've had on eNote 1, its predecessor. And lastly, we're going to take a look at the final end results in the DAF tool that I still have not released yet because I'm still tweaking some things. As you've seen, the reflectivity is counting some things wrong. So there's like an infinite amount of tweaks going on, but it is getting buttoned up, and more devices and more chances I have to kind of put it through its paces, better it's going to get. But it's still not public, so this is still something that I am working on and tweaking as I go. But we can have the initial kind of comparison results. So between the eNote 1 in blue and eNote 2 in orange, and we can see that overall DAF display analysis framework results are better and in favor of the eNote 2, which makes sense because if we go to the readability category, which is something that we've definitely noticed, and across the board, this is something that you clearly expect because of that 300 ppi screen. Higher resolution means better readability, and we can see that across the board for standard, thin, thick fonts, and the overall score massively better on the eNote 2. Contrast and uniformity is better on eNote 2. This is a bug of some sort. As I've said, I am doing the tweaking, and this is the reason why it's not public yet, because I need to kind of go through all of these situations and expose these different scenarios and situations and kind of see why did it actually calculate this thing wrong when clearly the core values were correct. So that's something that I have to kind of check out, but take this with a note that these numbers are wrong, and the eNote 2 definitely scores better in contrast and uniformity than the eNote 1, as we've clearly seen better blacks and better contrast on the eNote 2. Reflectivity is similar here, and this is the bug of needing to invert the values here, so I'm continually tweaking this, but reflectivity sharpness is better on the eNote 2. This is the problem here with this table, that this one is calculating higher is better, this one's calculating lower is better, and that thus creates confusion. So I need to fix that. But overall, the reflectivity definitely better on the eNote 2 as well as the ghosting, as we've seen across the board, even though it's not completely in all of the situations, but in the combined results, the ones that actually matter, in pretty much all of the refresh modes, the ghosting performance is better and noticeably improved on the eNote 2. But the area where eNote 2 is similarly like drastically different and improved than the eNote 1, like the readability aspect and the reflectivity aspect, the surface roughness, paper-likeness of the surface roughness is dramatically improved across the board on the eNote 2, which you can clearly see here as a very, very big difference. Surprisingly, the refresh times are actually lower and worse across the board for the eNote 2. Whether it is that it has to do with that new panel, bigger resolution, more things to clean up, therefore it takes more time, I'm not really sure, but the results are that it takes more time to flip a page and do a refresh on the eNote 2 than it does on the eNote 1. Writing latency, here lower is better. We can actually see that the eNote 2, despite it having an octa-core CPU and all of that kind of stuff, it's actually having quite a bit worse writing latency than the eNote 1, which is clearly not a good thing to have. Surface distance, lower is better in here as well, and as we've seen, it's a marginal improvement, but it is an improvement that you can measure on the eNote 2, having a slightly closer surface to screen distance. And lastly, battery life. Despite the eNote 2 actually having a not much, but a bigger battery than the eNote 1, it also has a more power-hungry CPU and internals. It has more RAM, it has more storage, and it has an octa-core CPU. And that definitely is something that you can see in the battery life performance, because with the reading, I mean, this device, both devices are without a front light, so only that option is able to be tested, where I continuously flip pages every 20 seconds for an hour and measure out the average consumption. eNote would have averaged around 100 hours of continuous page flipping per charge, with the eNote scoring at 66.67 hours per charge, which is absolutely excellent performance, and is going to still take you through a couple of weeks between charges of normal type of use for that type of thing, but it is noticeably lower than what we have on the eNote 1, and a similar story, or the same story continues and is noticeable in the writing, where I also continuously write for half an hour, and then I just measure out the average difference of consumption, and eNote 1 would average out at 16.67 hours of continuous writing per charge, and eNote 2 at 11.1 hours of continuous. However, despite the battery life being clearly lower than on eNote 1, it doesn't really matter in reality, because in either situation, both of these devices have absolutely excellent battery life that's going to take you clearly through any of the tasks for at least a week or even more. All right, so that's the Penstar eNote 2. Yeah, definitely an improvement over eNote 1 in most of the respects that are meaningful. Whether or not is it a competitive device, you're looking at the price range of Books Go 10.3, and that right there is the thing that's a huge problem for this device. They're very much in the same price range. They cannot be compared on any level. The only way that I think that this can have dominance over Books Go 10.3 should be, I haven't measured and I haven't compared them, but it should be the whiteness here, because that's the only selling point that this device actually have. So I think that it warrants a dedicated comparison, just a DAF analysis comparison between the Books Go 10.3 and the Penstar eNote 2 to see, like, hey, how do they actually compare, and whether or not there is a redeeming factor for the Penstar eNote 2. Because if the crispness and the contrast and the uniformity, image quality, is not something that's really obviously better to a meaningful degree than the Books Go 10.3, then it's really, really difficult to find a way to recommend this over the Books Go 10.3. So I think that that's going to be an important video for this device, because if you're looking at that price range, those are the devices that you are looking at. That's it from me. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe so that you get notified when new videos come out on my deep guide. And do let me know in the comments down below, what are your thoughts about this? Are you using a Penstar eNote 1, eNote 2? What are your impressions? And all of that kind of stuff. And I'm also interested to hear your opinion and your view about a device like this, where you taketh away a function on one way and then you basically release the performance, or you're supposed to release or improve the performance on another. Are you okay with those types of compromises? Is that something that's of interest to you guys or not? I'm genuinely interested to hear. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye!